Hey everybody, I'm Tim Cooper from National Parks at Night. Thanks for joining me. In our last two blog posts, I showed you how to shoot a series of frames in the field that you can use to create a stacked star trail image. And then I showed you how to create a final file in Photoshop by stacking those individual frames together using layers. Now, you can find those blog posts right over here, and I highly recommend that you check them out to get some background on this particular tutorial. Today, what I would like to do is take it up a notch and demonstrate various Photoshop techniques that you can use when you encounter unwanted artifacts in your star stacks, such as plane trails or car trails, or basically anything that it may appear on individual frames. So let's jump right in. Okay, here you can see a classic series of images that were shot with star trails, starting from here and going all the way down to here. This particular image was made in Colorado on one of our workshops, so we had lots of people walking around using flashlights and doing different techniques. And so we've got some frames such as this one, and these down in here that have some basically unwanted stray light coming in. And this is a great example of why you might want to shoot individual shorter frames rather than one long one to create your star trails. In this image, if I'd have started here and shot all the way for like an hour all the way down to this image, all of this would have occurred within my frame. It would be very, very difficult to take out. But because we're star stacking, it's really quite simple. So what we want to do when we're shooting in situations like this is make sure we get one good image in here where there's no stray light coming in. And then you can open it up, and then pretty much whatever happens in the foreground after that really doesn't matter because we can fix it. So as I showed you in the last tutorial, we're going to click on the first image and then shift click on the last image to select them all. And then we'll go up to Photo, Edit in, and then down to Open as Layers in Photoshop. And just as an aside here, you can see that there's a keyboard shortcut that is Option, Command, and L. I created that myself because I create so many stacks and I open images and layers in Photoshop all the time. You can do the same thing on a Mac, and I'm sure a PC as well. Just do a Google search on how to create your own shortcuts within programs on your particular computer, and you can create your own shortcut like I did here. So we're going to open these images into Photoshop, and this may take a little while, so we'll speed up the video just a touch to ensure that we're not wasting your time here. All right, now once all of your images are in Photoshop, and remember y'all, what we've just done is we've taken, I'm not even sure how many images that was, 20 images or so, and we've opened them into Photoshop as layers. And what that does is it puts all these individual frames as one layer, or I'm sorry, as one file in Photoshop. So yes, these are individual layers, but this is just one file. So when we save it, we've only got one image. All right, now the first thing we're going to do is to click our top layer and then scroll down, and then while holding the Shift key down, we'll click on the last image. Now what that does is it selects all of the layers. You can see they're all sort of a light gray now than a darker gray than they were. So next we'll go up and change our blending mode from normal to lighten. And the moment we click on that, we have just created our star trail stack. Now at this point, if there was no problems in this image, we could just go File Save and then File Close, and the image would return to Lightroom and we'd have our star trail stack. But in this image, we've got lots of problems, not the least of which is these flashlights walking through the frame. But we've got other problems, such as these little plane trails running through our image. Now, some people may decide to leave them in there because it's what's natural, and that's totally fine. But let me show you how you want to take them out, or the best way to take them out if that's what you desire. Number one, each one of those star trails may exist on one or two frames only. And the way that we want to differentiate between these frames or see what is on each frame is by using this eyeball. This eyeball represents layer visibility. So if I take off this image right here, if I click on the eyeball and take it off, that layer is no longer visible. Okay, let me zoom in a little bit and show you what I mean. Okay, I'm going to click this eyeball off. That layer isn't visible. Now this one isn't, and this one, and you can see our star trails are getting shorter and shorter because we are removing all of these different layers. Now here we've come to the red flashlights. So if I uncheck them, they're gone and they don't exist. So these eyeballs represent layer visibility, and if they're all off, then all we see is the transparency. All right, which means we're seeing nothing at all. If I click on one eyeball, this is the only layer that we're currently seeing. And once again, just to get the idea behind the lighten, is that when I click up on this next layer, because it is in lighten blending mode up in here, if I click on this layer, it's additive. The lightest parts come through. So while the foreground is completely dark and doesn't change from frame to frame, more or less, the stars do move, and they move into a different section of the sky where that star is brighter than the sky behind it. So that's what the lighten blending layer, or the lighten blending mode, does to these layers. So the trick here is to figure out which layer our star trails are on. So what I'll do is I'll go back and turn all of our layers off, and you just saw all I did was I clicked on that eyeball, I clicked and I dragged down. So click and drag down, and it turns those layers on. Click and drag down, and it turns those layers off. Now another thing you can do is just click on that layer, and I'm going to click on the layer actual, not just the eyeball, and you can control click, and that's on a Mac and a PC, and you can show or hide all other layers all at one shot. So that's another way to do it. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the eyeballs off just by dragging up through here. And we're going to start at the bottom of the stack, and I'm going to turn that one on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll around and look for well, that looks like actually a satellite rather than a plane trail. But you can see when I take it off, it's gone. When I turn it back on, it's there. So now what I can do is I can zoom into 100% by double clicking on my magnifying glass, and spacebar lends a hand. So whatever tool you may have in your hand, if you depress your spacebar, you can drag around the image in such a way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my spot healing brush. All right. Now the spot healing brush is only going to work if you are on the layer. And I am on this layer, and I can double check it by turning it off and saying, yep, there's the problem. So I click on this layer, and you can see this little white bounding box around the layer to ensure that, yes, I am on that layer. So now if I take my spot healing brush, I can remove this spot from the frame. Now, that was a crummy job, so let me hit Command or Control Z. An easier way to do that is to start with your brush at a decent size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my left or right bracket keys to make my brush about that much bigger than the satellite itself. And then I'm going to click and drag. Now you can do this. This makes it very difficult if you drink a lot of coffee like I do. I'm going to hit Command or Control Z. The other thing you can do is simply click on that spot, depress your Shift key, that's both on a Mac and a PC, and then move your cursor to the end and then click again. And it takes that whole area and fixes it. Bingo. Perfect. So now I'll come up here and I'll start here and I'll click once, hold down my Shift key, come up, click again, and release my Shift key. All right. Spacebar lends a hand. I drag down and it ends somewhere in here. So I'm just going to click and then Shift click and it's gone. All right. So that all works pretty well. You can see here there's a slight, it looks like there's a slight marking in here or darkening down of the area that I fixed. But believe me, you will never see that when you start adding in all of the other plane trails. You'll never see it. So don't worry about small little things like that. All right, so at this point, I have fixed the star trail, or I'm sorry, I have fixed the plane trail on that image. So I can move on to my next one. So I can click up on this eyeball, and again, I'm going to zoom into 100% by double clicking on my magnifying glass, and spacebar lends a hand, and I'm going to go through my whole entire image by starting in the upper left-hand corner like that. And I can see that there's an area here, so I need to come back and fix that. Let's just assume for a second that I have fixed that. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to put my cursor up in the upper right-hand corner. Spacebar lends a hand, so I press my spacebar down and I move over, and I see nothing here. So spacebar lends a hand, I move it over again, nothing. Spacebar lends a hand, I see nothing. And I'm just going to keep doing that. And then when I'm done there, I'm going to click on the bottom and drag all the way up until it reaches that point. Now, if I come over here with my cursor and grab on the left-hand side of the screen, spacebar lends a hand again, and drag over, I can see the next area. Whoops, my mouse stuck there. And in this way, what you can do is you can make your way across the entire frame and check that there's no artifacts that you want to remove. Okay, when I get to here, I can come down to the bottom, spacebar lends a hand, and pull that up again until I reach that point. And whoops, it's stuck again. And now I can see there's more of a problem here. All right, so I know that this layer right here is the layer that the problem is on, because if I take my eyeball on and off, ooh, look at that. It's actually not on that layer. It's on this layer. That's good to know. So now I have to be on that layer to fix it. See, I missed that one before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over and grab my spot healing brush again, and I'm going to click and then shift click and come down to the bottom, and it fixes it. Now at some point when it gets close to the area, close to a dark area like this, what you may need to zoom in a little bit more, and I just hit my Command or Control plus on my keyboard to zoom in my frame, and then my left bracket key to make my brush a little bit smaller, and then I might just come in and dab these areas a little bit to clean up next to that edge. Okay, Command or Control minus brings it back, and then what I would do is once again return to 100%, double click on the magnifying glass, and gather up my spot healing brush. You can tap J as well if you'd like to do that. And I'll make it a little bit bigger. Click and then shift click and fix it up. Now at this point, it didn't get up to this area up in here, so I have to assume that it's on this upper layer, which it is. So now in order to fix this area, I have to click on that layer itself. Now when I click and shift click, it will remove it. So it's incredibly important that you are actually on the layer that the problem occurs. If I'm down here and I'm trying to fix a problem on this upper layer, it's not going to happen. All right. So in this way, all you're going to do is you're going to go through each and every individual layer and zoom around the frame to ensure that there is no other artifacts. All right, and you'll just keep doing this until it's done. There's quite a pronounced one, so let's look at that. That's this one. So I'm going to click on that layer by clicking right here, and I can double click my magnifying glass to get into 100%, and there is the problem. So once again, eyeball off, eyeball on. I am on that layer, so I grab my healing brush, and I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to shift click right to the edge. Now, I'm not going to go all the way to the mountain because that may cause problems, because sometimes if you just drag across like this, it may pull some of the mountain out into the sky. In this case, it did a pretty good job. It didn't do it, but you may find that happens. So what happens if you zoom in, you could just kind of come in here and dab it a little bit, a few individual clicks, and that is going to fix the problem. All right. If that doesn't, you'll have to move to one of your other tools, such as your clone stamp or your regular healing brush. All right. So let's assume now we've gone through and we've fixed each and every one of the plane trails in this image. All right, that's great. So I'm going to click on all these eyeballs by clicking and just dragging all the way to the top and then releasing my click. And now all the layers are visible. Okay, cool. So we fixed all our plane trails by working on individual layers for each one of those plane trails or satellites. And now we have to fix the problem of these lights. Okay, well, this is the beauty again of stacking shorter images to create your star trails, because you can fix this. So if I take these two eyeballs off, we can see that's where the problem with the light is coming in. Okay, so it's on these two layers. So what I need to do is I need to remove that area from the mix. And when we want to remove something from being visible in Lightroom, or Photoshop, we create a mask. So I'm going to click on this layer right here, and then I'm going to go down to this area right here, the Create a Mask button, and I'm going to add a layer mask. And when it pops up, it's white, nothing has changed. Okay, so I click on the mask itself. Now I want you to realize what I've just done here. When I am here, notice that there's a white area around the image itself. When I click on the layer, the white area is around the mask itself. That tells me I am on my mask, and that's what I need to do here. I need to be on my mask and not my layer, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my paintbrush, or you can tap B for brush, and I'm going to choose black from the foreground background colors here by flipping this little bended arrow until black is on the top. That means now black is going to be, or the brush is now going to be spitting out black. Now, just like my spot healing brush, I can change the size of my cursor using my bracket keys, and that goes with any brushes that you're using in the toolbar. And because I'm on my mask, when I paint with black, it's going to say, okay, please do not let that area be visible at all. It's almost like you're cutting it away. So I just paint on this area in here, and it has removed some of that painted area, that light painted area. Now, once again, I'll click down on the layer below, and I will create a mask right here. Okay, it says Add Layer Mask. And once again, with my brush painting black being on that layer, and remember, you can see that that white line is around the mask, meaning it's active, I can then paint and remove that area from the frame. Notice this doesn't interfere with the stars at all, because I am only painting on the area that's below the horizon. So white means whatever's on this layer shows through. Black means whatever is on this layer will not be visible at all. So I have simply just removed those light trails from the foreground. Okay, that is the theory behind it. And you can continue to move on and do that on every single image that has a problem. So for example, this image here is also light painted, or rather there's some stray flashlight hitting it. And so if I create another mask, I click on the mask to ensure I'm on the mask, make sure that I have my paintbrush, make sure I'm painting black, and wherever I paint, that's going to go away. All right. So you can continue to do this throughout your image, but if it's a problem like this where there was constantly stray light coming in on all these images, so here there was stray light, here there was stray light, here there was stray light, and on this image there's stray light. So there's a whole bunch of images in this stack that have this problem. An easier way to go about that is to mask out a bunch of layers all at once. And let me show you how to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in and I'm going to turn on all of these layers by clicking and just dragging down through the layer visibility slot. And I'm going to throw out these masks, and we're just going to kind of start over. Now, when I drag that and click that mask down to the trash, it says, hey, would you like to apply the layer mask before removing? And you say, no, thank you, delete it. Okay, so we'll do the same thing on this next one. Just drag it down to the trash, delete. You could also, once you drag this down to the trash, you could also say don't show again, and you wouldn't be faced with that dialog box each and every time. Okay, now we're back to where we started. And what I want to do is I want to find one frame that has no bothersome light in the bottom. So I'm going to use my Alt key if you're on a PC or an Option key on your Mac, and I'm just going to click on this eyeball. And what that does is it automatically turns off all the other eyeballs. And I can see, hey, look, there's no light coming in. This is what it looked naturally without all of us bouncing around with our flashlights. So I'm going to keep this one on top where it actually is. If it wasn't, I would move it to the top. All right, now I'm going to click all my eyeballs back on again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this layer and then scroll all the way up almost to the top and click on the layer just below the top image. Now, these layers are all selected. So when you go down and hit this, this little create a new group button, right? It looks like a little folder. What it's going to do is it's going to take all of those layers and put them into one group. Now, I can create one mask for that group and remove all of that. So let me show you two ways to do that. Number one, I can click on group and click the mask and then grab my paintbrush, paint with black, and wherever I paint, it is going to remove all of that from the foreground. Okay, that's one way to do it. I'm going to Command Z, that's Control Z on a PC, Command Z again. A slightly easier way to do that in this case would be to use a selection rather than painting. So I'm going to click on this image because in order to make a selection, you have to be on the actual image that contains the area to be selected. And I'm going to go select sky. All right, now the sky is selected. All right, I can turn this selection into a mask. And in order to do that, you want to be on the layer or the group that you want to create the mask. So I'm going to click back on my group. I've got my selection active, and whenever my selection is active and I go down and click the mask button down here, it will turn this selection into a mask. So watch what happens. I go to do that, and bam, in one shot, I have just fixed all of the lighting problems down in here with one mask. So this mask is basically not allowing any of the foreground on any of these images to come through. And that's what that is doing because it's applied to the group rather than just individual images. So that is a super handy way to go about, a fast way to work on entire areas of frame at one time. Now, of course, if it was just one or two images that had a problem here or there, sure, just create individual masks. But here we had a bunch of them. The next thing is there was some light painting on this building that I did like, but now it's somewhere in here and it's being masked out. So I want to go find that image. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down my Shift key, and that's both on a PC and a Mac. And when you hold down your Shift key and click on a mask, it temporarily disables that mask. Now it's as if that mask doesn't even exist. And what I'm going to, here you can see the light on the building. That's the light I want. I just don't want all this other stuff. So I'm going to take all these eyeballs off and see if we can find that particular image. All right. Click on and off that eyeball. Nope, that's not the one. Nope, that's not the one. No. And I'm just going to keep doing this, taking these eyeballs on and off until I find it. Oh, there's one. That's got some nice light on it without any light here. Now, this looks like just the rest of them. So what I want to do is, because I want to come back to this, I'm going to mark it. So I'm going to right click or control click on an apple, and I'm going to change that to red. And oops, it hit all of those, and I don't want that. So I hit Command Z. What I'm going to do is click over here and change that to red. Now only that file or that layer is labeled red. Cool, we'll be able to find that much easier now. All right, so let's take that off. Put an eyeball here. That's not what we want. Put an eyeball here, nothing really there. Oh, that's kind of cool. Okay, so let's click on that layer and then control click and make that one red. Okay, take that off, no good there. We don't want that one. That kind of looks nice there, but I don't like this. So I'm going to label that one red. All right, now at this point, remember that each one of these red files that I'm going to put the eyeballs on is being masked out by this mask up here. So let me re-enable that mask by shift clicking on that mask. All right, none of the building that's been lit is coming through. So what I want to do is I want to pull them out of that stack. So I'm going to click on this one and then hold down my command or control key and click on that next red layer, and then command or control and click on that next layer. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these and pull them outside of the stack. Okay, now we can see the light on the building. So let's return and turn all our eyeballs back on. Okay, excellent. So the mask is working on all of the images except for these three above. So I'm just going to click the little down caret there and collapse that. And we can take these off and we can see that everything disappears. So really now all I have to do is mask out this lit area of these bushes, and it looks like it's probably on this image. So I click on that layer, add a mask, and then with a paintbrush or selection, however you want to do it, I'm just going to paint black and use a nice soft brush here and just kind of paint that back in. All right, so now we've removed all of the splay light on the bushes, and we're just left with the light on the building. Very cool. Well, we've accomplished our goal. We've gone through and we've removed all the star trails from the individual sky, or from the individual layers in the sky. And then what we've done is we've masked out a whole series of images by using a mask on the group. And then we've pulled the images we want the light to come through in the foreground out of the group. And now they're above and we're able to see them. And so we've now accomplished our goal. Now, of course, yes, I'd love to get rid of this down in here. A few other things I would like to change. But at this point, you could go File, Save, and File, Close, and then this would return to Lightroom. Now, this is going to be a fairly big image. When we look down over here, we can see that the image is 2.3 gigabytes. I have no problem retaining layers in a file like we are here if I feel that I need to go back and work on individual layers. In this case, however, I don't feel that I need to go back and work on individual layers. So I could flatten the image. All right. So your two choices are take this image as it is and choose File, Save, and then File, Close. And it returns to Lightroom, and you can continue working on there and export it as your JPEG, make prints, put it up to Instagram, whatever you may want to do. But if you want to do more work on this image, you have to think, do I want to do any more work on any one of these individual layers? Or do I want to work as a whole on this image? Okay, that's the thing. So if I don't have any reason to work on any of these individual files, what I could do is go to Layer and then Flatten. Where is that? All the way down at the bottom. And now what it has done is it has smashed all those different layers into one file, and now you can see it's only 139 megabytes instead of 2.3 gigabytes. So this file is much, much, much smaller. Okay? That is a great way to go if you want to just downsize your file. Now, a lot of times what I'll do is I'm going to hit Command Z here. A lot of times what I'll do is I will just go ahead and hit File, Save, and then choose File, Close. The image now returns to Lightroom, And you can see here it's different from the others because these are DNGs and this is the TIFF. These have no star trails. This one does. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually rename this. There's no reason that we have to stick with edit that Lightroom gives us. So I'm going to click on this image and go over to the right here. And I'm going to go into the file name. And instead of saying edit, I'm just going to click in there and I'm going to say unflattened. So now the image says unflattened. And this way I know that this is the image that's got all individual layers if I ever need them. Now what I can do is I can go and click on this image and choose Photo, Edit In, open in Photoshop again, but this time open it as a copy. And I'll choose Edit here. Now I'm creating a copy of this image. And at this point, what I can do is flatten this particular image and continue working on it if I want. These large files take a little while to open. It makes sense because it is 2.3 gigabytes. And here we have all of our layers. So now what I could do is I could just do Layer, Flatten Image, and it's returned to a smaller 1.39 megabytes, 139 megabytes rather than 2.3 gigs. Now this image is much easier to work on in Photoshop. Okay, so that's one thing you can do. The other thing you can do, which I often will do, is, let me just hit Command Z here, is to take all of these images, or rather all of these layers, and combine them into another layer. I click on the top one and I shift click on the bottom one and I've selected all the layers possible. So what I'm going to do is on an Apple, I'm going to hit Command, Alt, Shift, and E all at the same time, and then hold them down and press the letter E. Or on a PC, that would be Control, Alt, Shift, and the letter E. And what that does is it takes all of these layers here and combines them into one layer up here. So I can take these layers off and you can see all of my edits appear on this one layer. This is a great way to work if you don't necessarily want all of your layers active and you just want to have one image that is more or less flattened, but really not flattened at the same time. So I can take all these eyeballs off and this layer contains everything I need. Now, the reason you would want to do this is when you want to do physical changes to your image. So, for example, this image needs a bit of straightening of this building. I can't do that if I'm on all of these individual layers because that building occurs on every one of these individual layers. But I can do it if it's all on one layer. So your choices are save the image as layers and name it unflattened. Then you can reopen it as a copy and flatten it. Or you can open it up and you can use Command Alt Shift E on a Mac or Control Alt Shift E on a PC and create a composite of all of these layers. That's the way I'm doing this because what I want to do is I want to come in and I want to morph this image. I want to transform this image. Okay. So I click on that layer and I choose Edit, Transform, and we're going to go to Perspective. And what we could then do is try to straighten it out. All right. So in perspective mode, I can click and drag this image and it makes it look really bizarre, but that's how the lines will get straight on this image. That's kind of basically what you'd be looking at if you tried to do it in Lightroom 2. And we realized that clearly this is unacceptable. So there's a much better way to do this. Instead of just using your simple scale or distort or perspective or skew rather, there's something called warp. Now how I'm getting to that is, let me start over again and let me click on this image and go to Edit, Transform. Where I started was perspective. And even if I start in perspective and I try it and I'm like, oh, that's really crummy, that doesn't look good, all I need to do is hit Command or Control Z. I'm still in the bounding box of the transform command. you can simply right click, or on a Mac, that's control click, and I could come down and choose warp instead. Now with warp, you have control over the areas that you want to change rather than like some of the other transform commands. So I want to move this section inward. So I'm just going to grab this little point, and just to show you what warp does, I mean, you could really warp an image out and do all kinds of crazy stuff with the warp. So let me undo that. Command Z, you know, I could grab up in here, and I could grab and pull this down here, and that you can make your image look like that if you want. But obviously we're not trying to warp it in a way that looks fake. We're trying to make it look realistic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this button right here and just pull it over to the center. Now notice that it is actually stretching or pulling this area over, but it leaves this alone. So unlike what we did in perspective when we moved this corner over, and let me just show you that real quick, when we were in perspective and I moved this over, that area went white, which ultimately means I have to crop this out. Okay. Whereas when I go to warp and I grab this, it's stretching and morphing this entire area. So it's not leaving me with a white spot, and it's really not touching the sky at all. And then I can come over and grab this center one and pull this over and straighten out the building. And this may not be perfect, but I'm just trying to get it close for y'all to kind of see what I want to do here. And now I've straightened out the building without messing with the sky and without having to crop the image later on. So to commit, I'm going to hit the check mark. All right, so it looks like we ended up with a little bit that we need to crop out here. No problem. We're going to come in, choose our crop tool, click that, and then commit to that crop. And we have now pretty much fixed our image. And also because this whole entire photograph is now on one layer, I could also go down in here and fix this other bright spot. All right, so I can grab something like the patch tool and maybe just draw a little line around this and pull that over into that area there. And that's good enough for now. I could do it with better in other ways, but this tutorial is getting a little bit long, so let's end it there. So everybody, what we're saying is that the beauty of working with stacked star trail images or stacked star trail layers to create one star trail image allows us a lot of possibilities. It allows us to edit a lot of different things. The one issue is we end up with a whole bunch of different layers, right, in here that we have to cope with. But having all those layers allows us to work individually on any layer and fix the plane trails. It also allows us to remove areas like this from those individual layers so they don't show through. And then in the end, we can either save this image and leave all the layers intact, or we can save this layer, leave all the images intact, and reopen it and then flatten it, which again is layer, flatten, or we can do what I did, which was to select all of the layers and then hit Command Alt Shift E, or on a PC, Control Alt Shift E, to create a composite layer of all of these layers below in which you can continue to work on it, which is important when you are transforming or using the patch tool or using content aware fill. All of those need to be on a flattened layer. All right. So I really hope you guys found that helpful. It was a ton of fun putting this together. This is something that I literally do nearly every day, working in Photoshop, working in layers, working with masks and selections. And hopefully that gives you some insight into how some of these images are actually built, letting you know that the problems you encounter in the field are the same that we encounter in the field. We've just found ways to work around it. So thanks for watching, everybody. I really appreciate it. Remember, we always welcome constructive feedback. So if you feel so inclined to drop us a note in the comment section below, that would be great. And don't forget to like and subscribe while you're down there. And also consider signing up for our weekly blog posts at nationalparksatnight.com. That's where you're going to get more information like this. You'll see more videos like this. And it's a great way to educate yourself on night photography, Photoshop, Lightroom, and so on. Now, if you're really inspired, and hopefully you are at this point, check out our website and check out our workshops. You can find it at this URL right over here. And again, thank you, folks. I'm Tim Cooper from National Parks at Night. Appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you next time.